All right, we've been closely keeping an eye on the whole New World thing, and trust me, I don't want this to be something that's just beaten to the ground, but I warned so many people. And I'm not gonna share the emails that I've been getting. The amount of people that have told me I should have listened. I was in that camp of, I've been playing the game since launch without a problem. And I watched your video and I was like, haha, Jay doesn't know what the he's talking about. My card's fine. I had one guy tell me he got like 6 black screens in a row and kept playing it and then it popped. And it's like, what the? All right, so here's what we're gonna do today. I gave some suggestions in a previous video of ways that you could potentially limit your exposure to the New World coding and a couple of graphics cards on the market that are just, what I think is happening is that their power delivery system is slightly underspec'd in terms of the amount of load that something like New World is causing, which is pushing the power delivery to its limits and exposing a weakness in that design, which is popping 3090s, and that's why it's mostly 3090s, and yeah, other cards are being affected too. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna test those settings. We're gonna see exactly what's happening with our RTX 3090 for the Win 3 card. This is the first edition card which had the solder problem. It's still going, but it doesn't mean it's gonna last. I wanna see how those changes actually affect things in the game. Some things we actually discovered in the game that are even worse than we thought, and then we'll take a look at another card that I think won't have any problems and exhibit some of the behavior that we're showing. So let's just get into it. Today's video is sponsored by me. And these 3 graphics cards we're giving away. You can't see them because they're not actually here right now. Why? Because I want you to click the link down in the description below to see exactly what cards they are. Worldwide, for free, anywhere in the world where giveaways are not prohibited. So if you want to learn all about which cards we're giving away and how to enter and when it ends and all that sort of stuff, then you're gonna have to pause this video, click the link, and go and enter. Don't wait, you'll be sad if you did. You know, like Wayne Gretzky said, the only shot you miss is the one you take and you didn't 100% do. So a few things to talk about before we get started here. This is our EVGA RTX 3090 for the Win 3 card. This is a first revision. Like, this is the first ones that launched. We got this, that when we get the review samples from EVGA, one of the things I like about EVGA cards is the fact that they're not a pre-engineering sample. A lot of the products that we receive are from the test batches that manufacturers go through to verify compliance and that everything's working and all the tooling is good. And they'll manufacture a few hundred, maybe even 1,000 of those cards. And then they send those out for review, which are reminiscent of an actual retail experience. But again, that's not an actual card that was ever intended to make it on its way on shelves. There might be slight changes by the time it gets on the shelf and we do our review. EVGA, on the other hand, literally takes them from the same palette as launch. So this card is exactly the same card that somebody would have from the first edition. Now, EVGA already said, I think it was something less than 30 cards they had said, actually came back under RMA because they found that the way that the game was loading up the card, you can argue with me all you want. The game has coding flaws, which is exposing hardware flaws. It's a perfect storm. That's why you haven't seen them fail nearly as much on other titles. But it's a poorly written game exposing some poor hardware that made its way into the first edition cards. There was a weak solder joint in one of the MOSFETs that was actually popping, and that's what was causing the cards to die. EVGA found it, they warrantied all those cards, they were sent back out. Since then, Gigabyte is our latest offender. I don't have a Gigabyte card, unfortunately, because I gave it away in a giveaway. So I hope that guy's not playing New World. But anyway, at least one Zotac card caught fire that we know of because we showed you guys videos of that. And I have just seen a kind of a sprinkling of other brands here and there, which could have been the same type of like one-off defect affecting a very small number of cards. But EVGA had what appeared to be the highest number of cards affected because, fanboyisms aside, they have way more cards in the wild than any other brand. Just go and look at what cards are available, whether they're through scalpers or retailers or whatever. They almost are all EVGA because they have the most in the wild. So here's one of the things I had suggested that you do. We're using MSI Afterburner here. EVGA would say use their Precision X or PX1. Either way, as long as you're using some sort of utility to make these changes, you can try this out yourself. We're running the 472.12 driver, which is that the latest actually? Let me double check that real quick. So we're on the latest drivers, 472.12, and right now we are at stock. Now this card does have a multi-BIOS. One of the BIOS on here is actually an Extreme OC BIOS, which effectively removes our power limit. We clearly are not going to be doing that. But we have pushed this card extremely hard with Port Royal over and over and over again, whether it was on ice water or the air conditioner, which is one of the reasons why I think this card isn't necessarily affected by the solder issue that some of the other cards did, because that was a very specific batch. I have a feeling this one would have popped a long time ago with the amount of wattage that we were putting through it, which was getting pretty damn near 500 watts. So I don't feel this one's gonna pop, but there's some odd behavior I wanna show you here. One of the things I had suggested is that you take your power limit, which is this slider here, which is the total amount of power that the GPU and the entire board power actually is allowed to draw from the power delivery system. So if it's a 375 watt card or whatever it is, 100% would be 375 watts. If we lower that, then math should say that lowers the wattage as well. But there's a weird it's a weird disconnect in that it's not scaling the same. As you slide the slider down, the math isn't moving along with it. So I want to demonstrate that. But I had recommended taking the power slider and moving it down to like 90. Based on what I'm experiencing today, I would recommend moving it down to like 70. And we'll show you why in a moment here. So I'm just going to refresh that. Let me go ahead and start up New World. And let me give you an example of the weirdness that we discovered today. So while the game's loading up here, which does take a while, I want to point out that in the 3D management settings, we do have power management mode set to normal. I would definitely not recommend prefer maximum performance in this title. And then we also have our texture filter quality set to quality and not high performance. These are things that will help keep the GPU from working its way into an early grave. So what we're looking for here now is also DSR mode. DSR factors off. This is where you can upscale to a resolution that you don't actually have. Like if you're on a 1440p panel or 1080p panel, you can actually DSR, or dynamic super resolution, up to a fake resolution that your monitor doesn't actually support, but it's supposed to give you the effect of having that sort of resolution. I wanted to show you that those are off. DSR factors off. The menu is a rendered scene. This is a rendered game scene right here, right? Which is neat and pretty and it looks cool and stuff. But if we come over here to the settings, this is what we actually were met with. We were met with 323 watts of usage. It's going to fluctuate as all titles do. Core clock maxed, GPU usage not at 100%. But here's the thing. If you guys just caught what I did a second there, we enabled 4K. This is not a 4K monitor. This is a 1440p monitor. Okay, I show that we don't have DSR on because we're not faking the resolution. What I want to show you right now is watch what happens to our watts used on the graphics card as soon as I drop that back down to 1440. We just dropped 50 watts, or in this case, almost 100, because we were at 320, between 300 and 320, now we're at 220, 240. So it's fluctuating, obviously, as the scenes do. Look at our GPU usage. Look how far down that came. Our core clock was able to go up because of the fact that we're not hitting nearly as much near our power limit headroom. So first and foremost, why is 4K showing up as a resolution? Phil and I have actually been looking around and we can't figure out why the heck with DSR off, we never had it on. This is a fresh install of New World that has never existed on this test bench. So it can't have some oddly saved video profile for 4K, saying we had a 4K panel hooked up to it at one point, so it was able to. You guys have seen 4K break before, and what I mean by that is you have a 1440p panel or a 1080p panel and you load a game, and then the letters are huge because you're only seeing a quarter of the screen because it rendered in 4K, but it is only showing a quarter of the screen. Then you reset your resolution, it goes back to right, and then the 4K option disappears. That's not the case here. So we just discovered another funky bug, as Phil was pointing out. It's not a real full screen, it's a borderless full screen, or borderless windowed mode, because if you hit Windows key, the window would disappear or go black, because it's not exclusive full screen. So I switched it to windowed mode, right? So now you can see the window at the top, but now when I go back to full screen, we get a border. So the borderless portion of it went away.
Borderless bordered.
It's bordered, borderless, full screen windowed. Jay, just push Alt Enter, that gets rid of it. More lovely coding on the hands of Amazon games. So anyway, what I was trying to show you here, and look how small this got now, right? Look how small that got. That was all the way over here. It was huge and now it's small. Look Okay, we'll go back to 1440p. There it is. Okay, that's why. So I was switching resolutions, going to windowed mode. Bring that up, bring that back. Full screen. So it's whatever. So you can already see some of the coding in this game is trash. And now this is a problem with this card, and I've talked about this in the past. I don't know why it's doing this. I even flashed the BIOS. I updated the BIOS from a C9 revision to a D0 revision, which is one newer, and that's, I think, one of the latest for this graphics card, but I digress, that's besides the point. Right now our power limit in 1440p is around 80%. Okay, that's normal. If we go to 4K, now we hit that 100, but if you watch it, it'll fluctuate. It'll go a few percent above it, which is not that abnormal. There's 102, 111, that's not normal. Okay, we're set to 100, so that's already 11% overshoot. It's like timing in a car. You know, when you have a computer controlled timing, it's constantly adjusting, and every now and then it goes whoop, whoop, and comes back. Those little spikes, that hits hard on a GPU. That's where the voltage is just like, for a second, and that kind of hurt. But anyway, that's where it just suddenly hits it super hard, and that's really hard on the chokes. That's really hard on the VRMs, especially when it's overshooting 11% above where we set it. That's huge. And I've also advocated for people all the time going, you can't hurt your graphics card by moving these sliders. Well, turns out in this game you possibly could, because I'm only going to go to the 107. That's as high as it will let me go with this BIOS, is 107, or 7% above the higher TDP limit of this card. This card, it's a custom built card. 350 watts is the NVIDIA reference 3090 spec. The Founders Edition cards, the MSI cards, the Asus cards, all those cards that have a name, whether it be Strix, or For the Win, or Kingpin, or Gaming X Trio, those all have some sort of a higher base power draw in terms of power limit as well. So instead of 350, it might be 360, 375, 380. Some cards 400. But the power delivery system has to be built to obviously support that. Watch what happens if I go to 107. That's a lot higher than 107. Look at the wattage. We're in the menu. These are all pieces of the puzzle that's causing these types of problems to happen with this title. I don't know what it is. Now here's the thing. I just hit 124 for a second there. This card, though, this problem is specific to this card. And I will demonstrate that in a moment, because I do have an RTX 3090 Gaming X Trio right here, which only goes to 102, but it's rock solid. It does not overshoot. I flashed the BIOS on this card to try and see if it was something funky with our early edition BIOS, because it was the first run of the cards, like I said, the first retail run of the cards. We are drawing 406 watts right now, which is, in my opinion, higher than I think these cards were ever intended to run on a regular basis. New World should be considered playing the game of benchmark or stress test because of the way it's written. Oh yeah, this is Bob Sebastian. To me, he looks like Sideshow Bob, but also Linus. All right, so this is perfectly acceptable so far. All right, here we go with the fake 4K. All right, so now what if I were to max out that slider? Right to 400 watts. And it's like locked at 117. You see this? Look how. So we're locked. Okay, so far this seems to be doing all right in terms of like, I mean, 400 watts. So 412 suddenly for a second there. Okay, so we're getting 95 FPS right now in here. And if I bring this down to, let's say, 90, like I suggested in that video, would I go ahead and let that, nope, let's unlink them. Okay, we lost 5 FPS. Not noticeable, but look at this. Look at this. 80 watts dropped. In fact, if we start trying to lower the power limit and stuff, it acts completely weird. So let me show you. So if I go into, let's just max it out, right? 107, apply. So it's doing the thing where it's going way higher than I'm telling it to. Look at that wattage. Look at that percentage. 107 is where it should be targeting and fluctuating around in there, so it's going way higher. Look what happens if I tell it to go lower, because that was my suggestion, is drop it down to like 90, right? So here's 90. So the EVGA card was like, no, you can't have 90. You paid for 100, you're getting 100. Let's go 80.
What?
Let's go 50. So by going to 50, it dropped it down to 72. When people were writing me going, Jay, your suggestion isn't working. It's not reducing the power limit. I went, wait a minute. And then I tested this, and as you guys saw, I had to go over down to 50 to get it to go into the 70s. And at 90 or 80, like I was saying, it just ignored it altogether. Let's do this now. Let's go ahead and throw the MSI card on there and see how it behaves with this card. Before we do that, let me demonstrate to you that behavior about power limit shooting up high and stuff is not exclusive to New World, because people think I'm on this New World like hate train, and I'm not. We ran this test prior to shooting this video and updating the BIOS. And we were seeing that go up to like 110, 111. If I crank this guy, yeah, it still overshoots when you apply the higher power limit there. That says 107, but this is jumping up to 120. So there's still something weird with the increasing of the power limit there. All right, let's throw the MSI card on there, just for compare and contrast, because that's the due diligence thing to do. So I got the 3090 Gaming X Trio on the test rig now. This card is super conservative. It only has a 2% additional power limit, which is so funny. This is a card that has like, I think a 370 or 75 watt base. So it's 102% of that. So there you go. You can see this is pulling higher watts than the EVGA card is reporting, although I know the EVGA card is a higher wattage card. So you can see this is about a 370 watt card, but look how consistent this is. This is something I have noticed with this card. In fact, we have 3 of these cards. They're all the same, and I don't know what it is about it. It shows that super low wattage, but then you change the slider at all, and then suddenly it like skyrockets, and I don't know what that is. I've changed the BIOS and stuff on this. So if I go to 102 now, yeah, it goes up a couple of %. But look, it's like linear, it's in line, like it's going to where I'm setting it. So you guys saw though on the previous card, with this card, it was set to 107, but that was going much higher than 107. And I think that's a clue into part of the problems with this particular card in New World in the past, and it seems to be happening again. And it might be a clue as to what's happening with Gigabyte cards. Or that could also just be the fact that they've got some other weirdness happening with Gigabyte cards where they actually have remote power connectors that are using cables to plug into the PCB, and then there's another point of failure there potentially. So, of course, we gotta go do New World, and then we'll wrap this one up. That is... Phil, tell them I'm not crazy that we were seeing over 200, almost 300 watts in this exact scene, like this black menu. That's the first scene we noticed that things were going super high. Look at that. That's so much less already. 4K does the same thing here though. Look, it hit, oh, there we go, look at that. I showed you heaven first because we wanted to see what kind of fluctuations we were getting. The initial reports that we were seeing was cards were dying in the menu. This is the menu, look at that. 110, down to 86. And then it will make its way back up, look. And then it's gonna shoot down because it's like, whoa, what the hell? And it's trying to reduce its power draw, and it's going, what the frick is happening here? Watch, it's gonna go way up high again. See? And now it's gonna go down to the 80s. 111, watch. Or it's just gonna stay up there, way above where we set it. There we go.
You can't even set it that high on this card.
No, 102. Whoa, okay. That, I was actually not expecting that level of behavior. So if I go back to 100, funny how both cards now, if you go above 100 at all, nope, there it goes. We're at the 105 and we're on stock. And it feels like the longer we let it sit here, the higher we saw it go. Remember we saw it hit a 111? I cannot get this card to go over 102 if I'm doing Port Royal and stuff, because remember we started doing this particular series of overclocks last year with the air conditioner and stuff on the MSI cards first. And trust me, I wanted it to go farther than 102, and it was impossible. We're still going above it. We went to 104. So it's constant, 108. We're constantly bouncing off a rev limiter, essentially. Does this card scale a little better if I try and let's pull this down to 90? Yeah, look at that. This one stays much closer to where I put it. This card, the lower you pull it, the more gap there is between. Like I can set it to 40, and then this will be at like 75. So something is really weird with this card and the power slider. This is actually staying where I put it. So my suggestion of like, pull your power limit down, pull your watts down, might pull down your FPS some and such, but I'd much rather have lower FPS than 0 FPS because the card exploded. Yeah, look at that. It's like staying right around where I put it. It's behaving like it's supposed to. My recommendation of pulling down your power limit and undoing your overclocks absolutely is still my recommendation if you're gonna play this game on any of your graphics cards. That way, especially your high-end graphics cards that are high power draws. So there you go. All I wanna do, guys, is keep your hardware safe. This game is essentially a stress test. Certain cards are not passing that test hardware-wise, and it's important that you guys take these steps to try and protect yourself as much as possible. I guess that's a quest. My recommendation is still, like I just showed you here, reduce your power limit. You'll still have great FPS. Temps are low, power draw is low. You're probably not gonna hurt your card by reducing, I think, your power limit like this. Just play with the power limit to get it to where you can find a balance between the FPS you're willing to give up with the risk you're willing to take in terms of how much power the card is drawing. And you can even set up a specific profile in Afterburner so that when you run this game, this setting applies and it's not affecting all your games. You have to manually change it around. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget, we are giving away 3 graphics cards worldwide. You guys can learn all about that in the description down below. As always, we will see you in the next one. I'm gonna go cut down some more trees. This is tree whacking simulator.